Learning, an essential part of growing and developing as a human being in a functioning society. And to learn, we go to school, in something called an education system. In this education system, kids are normally bored. You cannot expect a kid to sit at a desk for 6 hours listening to some old person talk about boring shit. So, what if we had Sonic the Hedgehog talk about boring shit? Edutainment games are a very popular genre of gaming where they make a game out of education, and a lot of these games will get the rights to include an iconic video game character. And of course, this has happened multiple times with Sonic, dang near since the inception of the franchise. Let's go through every Sonic the Hedgehog edutainment game. The first of these games is actually a cancelled game. Sonic Edusoft was meant for the Sega Master System, developed by Tiretex and published by US Gold. This game was weirdly discovered as a Wikipedia page, which was later taken down, and once fans discovered it, it was discussed on the fan website known as SMS Power, and when discussed, a developer on the game would reveal multiple details, mainly development dates, the status of a ROM and source code, how the game wasn't even licensed from Sega, etc, etc. And later in 2008, the game's ROM would be completely dumped, with the game only working on certain emulators. The game contained a hub world you can walk around and explore over 15 levels to play, which all involve solving a problem. Whether it's completing a word or solving a math problem, you're racing a moto bug, which is super slow and very bad at this game. All the levels are pretty much the same, where the problems get slightly harder, but nothing too intense for anyone like 6 and up. The game also features mini-games that are seemingly just score attacks with no educational value. The balloon mini-game gives you time to roll Sonic to pop a balloon without falling into a bottomless pit. Trampoline has the player control a trampoline as Sonic bounces from platform to platform. And lastly, the Green Hill mini-game is essentially just an endless runner with 2 separate jumps, one being a shorter jump and another being a long jump. To gain score, you jump into balloons to gain 100 points. Overall, you can tell this game wasn't even close to finish, so I won't duck it, but it is still quite low in challenge and interesting mechanics, even for an edutainment game. Skipping way ahead to 1994, Sega would make their own edutainment console called the Sega Pico, a weird laptop-like console for educational games, and of course their mascot would be a part of the console, with Sonic the Hedgehog's Game World being the first of the 2 games to release on the console. In this game, Dr. Eggman has hidden a Chaos Emerald on each floor of his brand new Game World amusement tower. And so now, Sonic, Tails, and Amy must complete every minigame on each level and find the emeralds. Trust me, do not expect many of these games to have stories. For this is quite a standout, even if basic. And despite this being an educational game, I'd say it teaches very little in the way of educational topics, even if the game does advertise itself as teaching strategy and dexterity skills, which it kind of does, mainly just having some timing and memory-based minigames with different themes depending on which floor/storyware page. Oh yeah, storyware pages. You see, the Sega Pico wasn't just designed like a laptop to confuse tiny children. No, the game's cartridges also doubled as a weird book thing with pages and everything. So in the case of Sonic's Game World, this would be how players progress floors of the game world, with one of the floors from the Japanese version of the game being cut. In fact, a lot about the game was changed in its US release to fit the more educational intent of the Sega Pico, as in Japan, it was more of just a console for younger kids. There were changes to certain mini games, like the Sonic vs. Eggman one being changed from a physical violence like punching and kicking and spin dashing. Instead, Sonic and Eggman just toss rings at each other to deal damage. The concentration minigame's background was changed to have a gray blank background opposed to a casino themed one, and a bunch of minigames that weren't educational focused were cut from the game completely, like a fortune telling game based on birthdays, a roulette wheel where players bet on rings, slot machine minigames where you play for rings, a Sonic staple, a game of poker, and lastly there's a rock paper scissors game. It's pretty self-explanatory. Overall, I think Sonic's Game World might be one of the better games due to its lesser focus on being educational and more of being a fun mini-game collection for 5-year-olds with a pretty neat Sonic aesthetic. Even if it's relatively simple, the sprites and artwork for this game are very adorable to look at, and it's just kind of fun looking. I don't know, I think I like Sonic's Game World. The next game for the Sega Pico would be Tails and the Music Maker, with this game being a little more teaching based with the intent to teach kids about music being learning scales, tempo, rhythm, etc, etc. This game features mainly activities that revolve not merely around music. Sure, a lot of the background music is iconic kids' nursery rhymes, and occasionally there will be times where the player messes around with notes and such, but it doesn't do a very good job teaching kids music, especially running off the Sega Pico sound chip. It's a solid enough game though, nothing special but nothing bad besides, not owning up to what it's sold as. Moving away from the Sega Pika, we move to a more notorious game, with Sonic's Schoolhouse. This game was meant to teach kids spelling, math, and reading for the PCs with Windows 3.1 and Windows 95. The game was definitely more of a traditional edutainment game where Sonic acts as a guide throughout the game, whilst players choose an animal to play as for their first-person control. In this game, you mainly just answer questions by using bouncing letters, numbers, and balloons with pictures on them. There's also a field trip section in the game, where you can go on a field trip and learn about any of the animals on the bus using one of the 3 camera buttons above the windshield screen thingamajiggy. Along with this, you can also play one of 2 mini-games, the first of which being Match the Statues, and a ring collecting game. Overall, this is a fine enough edutainment game. Not too fun, but if you're 5-year-old kids in the 90s who love Sonic, I'm sure you would get a kick out of it. But there are 2 things pretty important about this game. For one, this game actually uses the model and sprites from the cancelled Sonic game, Sonic Extreme. And lastly, the recent reception of this game has been everlasting per se. Fans in recent years have dubbed Sonic Schoolhouse as creepy, primarily due to its very early 3D animations and low budgeted gameplay. It has been so prevalent in recent years that it even went on to inspire an indie mascot horror game, Baldi's Basics in Education and Learning, which is a horror game very clearly inspired by Sonic Schoolhouse if you just look at the game. Trust me, this thing was cool to people back in like 2020. So in 2003, there was a very popular handheld edutainment device called the Leapfrog Leapster. This thing was super popular among young kids. Even I had one. Well, I had a Leapster too, but I still kinda had one. This thing became so popular, especially with its licensed games, and of course a notorious blue hedgehog would come to the system. And it would be based off the most popular piece of Sonic media in 2007, Sonic X. Yeah. Yes, despite Sonic and the Secret Rings releasing in the same year and Sonic X already being over, Sonic X, even after its finish, was still super popular via reruns and even ran until 2014 on Jetix. So a Sonic Leapster game based on Sonic X was the logical step to go in. In this game, Eggman is upset that everyone is talking about Sonic and not him. So now Eggman captures Sonic's friends, and now it's up to Sonic and Spoiled Rich Kid to stop Eggman and his new math bots. This game pretty much plays like the most generic of generic side-scrollers, where the player controls Sonic answering math questions to defeat the math bots in the way. Along with this, we have levels, mini games with Eggman's Badniks will appear, which will ask you questions about counting, adding, or subtracting rings. Overall, this is a fine enough game. While the actual platforming and levels are whatever, the game does do a pretty decent job teaching basic math skills for its target demographic using Sonic the Hedgehog. They even got Jason Griffith and Mike Pollock to reprise their roles as Sonic and Eggman. That's kind of funny. And our last hurrah with edutainment games will be Sonic the Hedgehog for the Leapfrog Didge. Whatever that is, am I right? Like, what kid owns a Didge? Yeah, like what late-mo would have a Didge? Yeah. This game was meant to teach kids the basic of spelling more advanced words, with the game mainly being targeted at kids ages 7 to 10. In this game, you traverse multiple Sonic levels from Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. Despite this though, the first level of the game, Green Hill Zone, is actually just Emerald Hill Zone, despite Emerald Hill Zone also being in the game, which is even more confusing considering these zones both use the exact same music. The education element comes from these little mini games scattered around levels though. In every level, it'll ask a little neat gimmick mechanic like popping badniks or popping monitors or screwing in a gear, with letters and words lined up on them to spell out or correct a word. Other than that though, it's the same deal as Sonic X but for complex spelling. Despite featuring some actual Sonic-like level design, this will be one of the first games to actually require you to go fast as Sonic the Hedgehog in a game. So honestly, that kinda deserves points, even if the game controls like absolute dog doo-doo. And there you go, that's every single Sonic edutainment game ever. There's not terribly too many, so this is honestly a quite quick video to make, but overall I'd say they're weird. The whole premise of Sonic games at the end of the day is about going super fast, and so trying to combine that with learning basic baby bullshit like how to spell car is gonna be difficult no matter what you try. I think the best attempt with these games would honestly be Sonic's Game World, and even then, it's just kind of a solid enough mini-game collection. It's not really an edutainment game. Overall though, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.